I just bought the most controversial Ford Mustang ever made from Salvage Auction, a 2016 Shelby GT350. On one hand, the GT350 is an absolute track star. It's got Brembo brakes all around, Recaro seats, and a 5.2-liter flat plane V8 making 526 horsepower. But on the other hand, that fancy engine I just mentioned, it has quite the tendency to fail in a horrific variety of ways. From harmonic vibrations backing off oil filters and causing catastrophic fires, to excessive oil consumption destroying virtually every internal engine component. If it's good, it's worth what we paid for the car alone. And if it's not, well, we're gonna lose a ton of money. All the issues aside, this is still a really special Mustang, and it has a ton of valuable parts. We're gonna salvage everything we possibly can, and with any luck, make it on the high scores list. But we do have ourselves a good bit of work to do before we find out exactly how we did, because this thing is a wreck.
Where did this car went?
It clearly went off-road, right? Look at the engine bay. It's absolutely disgusting, filthy. There's mud all over everything. That's just the start of it. Pretty much every body panel on this car got destroyed. The whole front end, the driver's side, the rear bumper got completely ripped off. It's actually not in half bad shape, and this lower diffuser is worth a few bucks, so there's that, I guess.
This is a factory option?
No, the buckled roof is definitely not a factory option. This thing is wild. The rear passenger quarter panel got it the worst. This is, I don't know, 6-8 inches in. This is a bad one.
I bet you $5 somebody's gonna say in the comments, bro, I can fix that.
Don't do it. Let's just let this one go, please. Sometimes we get these cars from the salvage auction and they're just so rough that you don't really know where to start. You can barely even look inside the interior. There's bumpers, body panels, random stuff stuffed all inside of it. You can barely see the seats. The driver's airbag didn't blow. I can't see how, but hey, I'm not gonna complain because it's worth a ton of money because of that little slippery snake right there. Our work is cut out for us on this one, but personally, I think that's kind of the fun of buying salvage cars. Taking something that's otherwise useless and seeing what we can, well, salvage out of it. For as bad as the outside is, let's hope the underneath's a little better. And you know, the oil pan isn't blown off in it, or the transmission's cracked in half. This thing went for a ride. All the coolers are swayed over. The driver's oil cooler is completely ripped off. The suspension's not only caked in mud, but the driver's is bent, broken. It's really not in that great a shape. The engine though, the transmission, all that does look pretty good. Just like everything else, it's caked in mud, but the oil pan's perfectly intact. And these do tend to fail quite a bit because they're plastic. It's also really common for these cars to break the transmission mounts, and it doesn't even look like that got moved around. At least at first glance here, it looks like all the important stuff stayed where it should. The rear diff, that's perfectly fine. These GT350s do have a special auxiliary differential cooler that hangs off the back. That got dented up pretty good. The exhaust tips, it looks like they're missing, but they're actually up there. They're part of the lower diffuser. You can kind of see them.
I mean, the good thing is, like, it's dirty and it's kind of awkward, but you don't see any oil around.
This
so
is
that
true.
Means basically that after the accident, they didn't try to run it.
Or all the oil leaked out of that oil cooler right there that got ripped off, and it doesn't have any oil in it.
Is the engine locked?
Haven't tested it yet. Clearly, we still have a lot of questions to answer about this Shelby, but I can't lie, I'm pretty excited about it. I paid just under 13 grand for the car. Solid money maker? Waste of time? Let's find out. First order of business, getting all this junk out from the inside. This is the first time I've got to look at any of this. Hopefully, some of it's in halfway decent shape. Probably can't sell that, can we?
No. I see a nice fog light at least.
Yeah, there's fog lights. There's some in here that's worth money. We just gotta get it out without destroying the seats. Without destroying the seats further. We have one fog light. All right, we have more than I thought we were gonna have. This piece, this grill, this plastic piece, that's all GT350 specific. It's gotta be worth a little bit. And the PPF.
Yeah, I think we got lucky, right?
Well,
Yeah,
that
PPF.
doesn't really do anything for us. I know spending $13,000 on a car and then getting hyped up about a couple small plastic pieces seems a little weird, but paying attention to stuff like this adds up in the end every time. It did make it real easy on us to get stuff out of this car, at least. This is some type of under panel. It's broken in half. This part's completely blown apart, but it is a Shelby logo lip. That's kind of cool. We have, well, I almost said we have taillights. They're not taillights, so the taillight covers also damaged. It really looks like there's just a bunch of broken junk in here. One thing that's not junk though, these seats. Fortunately, all that stuff sitting on them didn't seem to do any damage. There's a few indentations like that. Otherwise, they're just really dirty, but we got a guy for that.
Oh, is it iPhone or Android?
An older iPhone, two cameras.
Okay.
If you happen to be the person that owned this car and you're watching, message me. You can have your phone back.
For 50 bucks. Hey, we tried to recover some money, right?
These seats are so incredibly light, it's not even funny. Wow. While the seats are far and away the coolest part of this just absolutely disgusting interior, that's not where the special stuff ends. So what I think we're gonna do, you and I are gonna hunt down all the cool stuff on the inside, and Fernando, he's gonna try to revive these seats the best he can.
Go home.
Yeah, I knew we had the right guy for the job. Look at that fancy tool. Where'd you get that? One part that's unique to the GT350 that will be pretty easy to overlook, this door panel insert. The rest of the door panel, it's exactly the same as every other Mustang. With this insert, they put a little bit of Alcantara on it, and that one small change makes it a lot more expensive. Being that we're dealing with, you know, the best of the best Ford had to offer here, they really went all out with the materials. Not just on the door panels, they did the steering wheel too, which is a lot for Ford. Physically, I believe this wheel's the exact same as the GT. They just did the snake on the airbag, and then they used a few different materials on the wheel. They did suede or Alcantara on the outside, and put a nice little stripe up the top, which is real race car stuff. Now that we got that out of the way, that's pretty much all the cool GT350 specific stuff in the interior, except that start button is just not really worth that much money. Now it just looks like every other Mustang. We did get pretty lucky on this in that none of the stuff that's unique to the GT350 was damaged at all, except, well, the seats. These gauges are not too much different from what's used in the performance pack Mustang GTs, but the trim itself is like a black brushed aluminum. That's unique to the GT350s and the GT350Rs. The gauge cluster, looks wise, it's the same, but it revs to 8,200. I think the Coyotes go to like 7,500, but don't quote me on that. And then we have our shift knob here. It's pretty heavy. It's a decent feeling knob if I've ever felt one. As for the seats, these look good. You crushed it on these. The fronts were bad enough. The rears were probably even worse. They were full of glass. We do have some indentations there that'll probably come out or at least lessen with time. So what's the secret?
I really can't tell you about it. It's a ScrapLife secret.
ScrapLife secret.
Yeah.
Realistically, this blown airbag isn't as big of a deal as it seems. I know it's quite the eyesore, but the people who are typically buying these seats aren't putting them in newer Mustangs. They're going to some type of project car, maybe an old Fox body. That means they can take this thing out, have this sewed back up by an upholstery shop, or use zip ties if they previously owned a 240SX and be on their way. This handful of parts that took all of an hour to get out makes up like 75% of the value of the interior, but we still have a little money on the table. This next part's not technically interior, though it is only interior, so I guess that's up for debate. Holy f***. I came in here to get the fuel pump, being that the GT350s have a dual fuel pump and the GTs are single, but the housing itself is blown apart. I can't say I noticed it while we were under there, but I guess the gas tank got hit hard enough to destroy this pump, which I can't lie is kind of impressive, even though it just cost us a couple $100. I guess we really shouldn't be surprised given how junky this car is. In fact, it was so junky, this is pretty much all we managed to scrape out of the interior. The most expensive parts, this driver lower airbag, which somehow didn't go off. I think these are like $400 nowadays. The brake and clutch pedals, these are about $150. And then we have the center console, and it kind of goes downhill from there. There's a bunch of $50 parts in there. We did leave a few parts, like say the dashboard. The stitching on it, it's black. It's the same as pretty much every other Mustang. So while the passenger airbag didn't blow, it just wasn't worth the labor to get out, given that we have 10 on the shelves. Now, I don't by any means claim to be a fortune teller here, but something tells me the exterior is going to go similarly smooth. There's not a whole lot going on here. We have, wait, what do we have?
A badge, a band, probably the side skirt.
Yeah. All right, we'll see you guys in 15 minutes. Yeah, we might have just set the record for the fastest exterior dismantle in the history of salvage stories, and trust me, I know it still kind of resembles a complete car, but everything left is just not in great shape. Even the stuff that really would have held some value, the GT350 specific spoiler in this rear plate that has some type of a Shelby logo that's supposed to go right there, in this case somebody stole it, all that's damaged. This rear panel has a really minor crack on both of the sides, and the spoiler, well, that has a crack that's not so minor. And I know at this moment it might not seem like things are going great, but we're in this car really cheap by GT350 standards, and this is just the name of the game when you're buying cars that are this heavily damaged. Though like the true vultures of the automotive world that us salvage guys are, we were able to pull a little bit of value. That entire rear diffuser, complete with the reverse lights, the exhaust tips, a fender vent from both sides, that hood vent, the side skirt, which is actually in a lot better shape than I thought it was going to be, and 2 badges. Yeah, when you say it out loud, it really doesn't sound like a lot. Either way, all this stuff's going to pull us a nice little bit of money, and if the engine ends up being good, it's essentially going to be our profit on the car along with some of the other stuff we haven't pulled. Now, if the engine ends up not being good, shift knobs and fender vents, well, they're not really going to cut it. And with that in mind, I think now seems like the perfect time to get our first look inside the motor by draining the oil. You guys know the deal. This past year has been pretty rough on the oil draining front. Karma's got to come back at some point. I think this is going to be fine. Yep, there we go. It should be fine. 3, 2, 1. Oh, it's gonna be fine. Oh yeah, no water. I mean, that's about all I can ask for the way my stuff's been going. So, it's a start. That's exactly what we want to see. Not too old, not too new. Believe it or not, at Salvage Auction, sometimes new oil can be a red flag too, because sometimes that new oil is gear oil. And for those of you who might not quite understand why somebody would do that, well, gear oil quiets down a knock real fast. This is about as healthy of an oil drain as you could ever want. There's no foreign material, there's not even any gasket type material, and definitely, most importantly, no gold flake. Not only was the engine oil good, but the gearbox, the diff, even the coolant, it was all pretty much flawless. And that's not necessarily what I expected given how trash this car was. And personally, I can't think of a better way to celebrate than taking my favorite tool for a jog. You see, this exhaust system, it's damaged essentially everywhere. Even this muffler that I thought was good, it's dented pretty badly in the bottom. It's bent there, it's bent there. But there is one part that's still good. These bad boys right here, they're OEM active exhaust actuators. There's a little flap on the inside, and these are really popular to retrofit into all kind of custom exhaust projects. As for the rest of the exhaust. Next up, the suspension. This is another area where Ford gave us some touches that are unique to the GT350. Now, how many of them are going to be good? That's a very different question. We're not necessarily starting off on the highest note. This is one of the wheels that looked like it could have been good, but on the backside it's gouged up pretty badly. We'll check that out on the balancer in a little bit. But as for the brakes, they look really similar to the Performance Pack Mustangs, but they are completely different. These Brembos are radially mounted, meaning the bolts go in from this way instead of the back like a traditional caliper. The hubs themselves are specific to the GT350 to account for that brake caliper change. Not only that, but they're lighter and they have a bigger diameter wheel bearing to hold up the track use a little better. All these control arms, they're different as well. These cars have a 1-inch wider track width. Unfortunately, they are bent up pretty good. I don't trust those. I don't trust the strut. The hub, though, that's the last thing to bend in a wreck like this. I'd be 100% confident using that on my car or selling it. Not only is this front hub assembly pretty valuable, it completely changes the way we sell things. Instead of breaking these down and selling the calipers by the pair, selling the rotors separately, which are also bigger and lighter than the GT counterparts, we just do one big conversion. The hubs, the rotors, the calipers. Normally I'd throw in the rear hubs as well, but it wasn't really an option on this car. So we're left with one random rear hub that we'll sell separately. All this is going to pull about $2,000, which is good because this is pretty much all the rest of the suspension we got. A pair of ride height sensors, a few control arms, one shock, the rear sway bar, and a pair of rear springs. These guys are wound in opposite directions, which is a cool touch that you don't usually see on street cars. As for the rest of the suspension on the car, it's damaged to almost an impressive level. We weren't able to get one single straight control arm off the front of this car. But just like the body and the interior, you can't really ask for much more from the suspension. It's just how it goes when you're shopping for bargain basement parts cars. The drive shafts in these cars are no jokes. We had to bring in a little extra muscle. You got it?
You got it.
Now on the rear diff, other than this cooling system, they're not that much different than any other Mustang GT diff. It is pretty popular to convert to these, not for strength, not for gearing, it's just for the cooling setup. And while the cooler itself is damaged, the pump, these lines, that should pull us at least a couple $100. 3, 2, where are we going? I don't know, good question. Well, team, it's about that time. There's only one area of the car left to attend to, and it's the important one. We've still got a few small, albeit important and hopefully valuable things to deal with. But since we've cleared out so much of this car already, I'm thinking this engine's gonna drop down in, I don't know, 30 minutes. This carbon composite radiator frames one area where they really tried to cut down weight in the GT350s. On the normal Mustangs, they're metal. When these guys are in good shape, they're about $1,000. This one, not so much. It's blown apart. I think there's still some value here. There's always somebody trying to fix something cheap, and I have a feeling they'll still pay a couple $100 for this. One thing that's almost always a bonus on cars, an aftermarket intake. We have this nice JLT unit here that I forgot a clip on. But when it comes to the GT350, the stock intakes are so nice and so expensive, this is kind of a downgrade. We're like 99% done up top. Just gonna, I meant to catch that. Get a little, I meant to catch that one too. We're gonna get a little bit of a head start on the bottom side. This way it's just a little bit less to struggle with when we're under here on a creeper. All we got left up here, I believe at least, is the engine harness. Shut up. I know this isn't like me, it's gonna come as a surprise to many of you, but I do have to give Ford some credit here. Of all the domestic car manufacturers, at least, Chevy, Dodge, their engines are pretty easy to drop out.
That's the only compliment that you can come out with it.
Probably don't need to tell you guys that the transmission mount is the least fun part to get out when you're dropping a drivetrain down as a whole. All right, that should be it. Now we get to play our favorite game. Well, it's only really my favorite game when we didn't forget anything, but what did we forget?
Probably a ground.
A ground.
100%.
No, we got that ground right there. I knew that one was there all along. Nobody came and reminded me about that one 30 seconds ago, so
yeah, right.
We'll be fine.
Huh?
Something's hanging.
I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty sure that was the issue, right?
All this wiring has to sneak down past the frame rail. It's pretty tight, but I don't see why it wouldn't. There is one thing we truly did forget, this brake line. It runs under the engine to the subframe. What can I say? I'm not a Ford guy.
Jet, right?
No. We said that like a year and a half ago about Dodges, and you saw what happened.
Exactly,
no,
yes.
I'm not a Mopar guy. I'm a guy with Mopars, all right? There's a difference. Now, one other really cool thing I've been waiting until we drop the drivetrain out to talk about is this transmission. The normal Coyote cars come with an MT82 6-speed manual. They're glass. People break them left and right. This, though, it's a Tremec 6-speed. I believe it's called the 3160. I was pretty concerned that we were going to have some type of damage back here. In these hard hits, it's really common to have the shifter ripped off, the tail housing broken, the trans mount broken. All of it's perfectly intact. I was fully expecting there to be some damage, but hey, not going to complain. That doesn't sound like this engine. It's a flat plane crank, okay? Now, before we leak this engine down, either make or break our night, we got one more thing to pull off the car. I guess technically the term pull off the car isn't the correct one to use, but... These frame rail cuts, always a nice little bonus. If somebody wrecks their car and bends theirs, they'll buy a section like this and try to piece it back together. I am kind of surprised that we got a straight one out of this car, but hey, it's an extra 400 bucks. Now we're at the point where we kind of can't put this off any longer. The moment of truth, if you will, the leak down. Usually I'm the confident one going into these things, but on this one, confidence isn't, it's not at an all-time high, we'll put it that way. It didn't have any keys. We weren't able to run it. Even if it did have keys, it had massive electrical damage. In my experience, this always goes better if we're able to hear it run first. You get to start it, rev it, clean all the carbon off the valves. This one we're shooting blind. I mean, it had clean oil. Everything looks fine. Predictions.
5.2. We're going to have a lot of those numbers.
5.2s?
Yeah, and why am I saying that? Because we get a 5 and a 2 right here.
That's
it's going to be 5,
something else.
2, 5, 2, 5, 2, 5, 2.
Okay, so if you couldn't cut through that BS that he just, spewed out of his mouth, 5s and 2s would be fantastic. As long as it's under 10% or even 12%, I'm happy.
There's going to be a clipboard smash on this one, just like the good old smoke days. I'm feeling it.
And of course, by that, he means it's going to be a clipboard smash out of celebration. It's going to be a party clipboard smash because this thing's going to leak down flawlessly. I hope. Come on.
That's a solid 5.
It's a 5, so technically...
Well, technically, it's a 2.
It is closer to a 2. Okay, so he could be right. We're over halfway done, and at this point, there's only one cylinder that leaked down into 7, which is still perfectly fine, that ruined Fernando's guess here. What do we got?
More. That's I would say an 8. Going up. What's your guess?
Feels like a 5. What do we got? It's 5. It's 5.
That's a 5.
It is.
Damn,
Okay, yeah, I knew it.
You nailed it.
I knew it. This whole time, never once doubted it. It's a Ford after all. Of course, it was going to have a good engine.
You see how many 5s are in there?
Some
And
5s,
2s?
some 2s. All right, so we'll give Fernando partial credit on this one. Now, Dalt did say we were going to break a clipboard, implying that it was going to go poorly. I'd be so mad that I would smash the clipboard over my knee. So we will break a clipboard. It'll just be his clipboard. One there, one there. So most things went pretty well in this car. The wheels, not really one of those things. This one is okay. It's not in great cosmetic shape, but it doesn't look bent. These two, absolutely no bueno. This one has a big chunk out of the inner lip, and this one is just ground down everywhere, and it wobbles about as much as you could have a wheel wobble. Yeah, that's an accurate depiction of what it looked like on the balancer as well. We did manage to get one good wheel, the driver rear. Cosmetically, again, not in fantastic shape, but it's straight as an arrow. And the tire that was on that corner also happens to be in really nice shape. For a car hit that hard, a couple wheels, one tire, and a set of center caps, not bad. I gotta admit, when I was pulling all this stuff out of the car, it felt like we got a lot of cool stuff. So much of it felt GT350 specific, and now it just kind of looks like a regular Mustang on the floor.
Basically, there ain't much different.
While Fernando's knocking out all that, and before I get to list all those parts online and see how we did, we got to talk about something. So I know we just shredded a GT350. Well, this is a GT350R. It's got all the fancy stuff, the carbon fiber wheels. It's basically the best of the best road race car that Ford's made. Now, this was supposed to get shredded next, but after looking at it, someone thinks the damage is a little light, and
It's not light. This is not an easy repair by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think it's going to be an overly expensive repair. And it's pretty easy why. There are no Shelby specific parts on this car that need to be replaced. Everything Shelby specific looks to be okay. That's minimal. That's minimal. What I'm talking about is all the Shelby specific front end parts. This wing, as bad as this looks, doesn't look to be broken in any way. All the wheels look to be good, although we are going to have to put some tires on it.
I mean, maybe. Either way, I was kind of hyped up to tear this thing apart, but seeing it get fixed, I mean, I can't really complain about that. It would be really cool to see you fix this, I don't know, what do we call it? $45,000, you know, Ford factory racer, and then I beat it with my $10,000 Boss 302 project that you guys will see soon.
I fixed Chevy's best track car that's out there, the 5th generation Z28. This is the comparable model to it with Ford. I feel like I have to fix this and see how they compare.
Let me know what you think. Put it down in the comments if you want to see Dalt fix this thing. I mean, I'm obviously for it because, again, I would like to beat it with a $10,000 car. All right, no more parts, no more Mustangs. It's just down to numbers at this point, and the numbers aren't bad. Total number of parts, 69. Very small number. We didn't take much off because, as you guys know, most of it was destroyed. As for a dollar figure, $30,083. A decent number on most cars, but it's a GT350, so I was hoping we'd be a little higher.
Seeing how bad a shape that thing was, I'm surprised it produced that many parts for that much value.
As for what made up that value, it's all the stuff you would expect. We had the engine for $14.5. We have the seats for $23, the full set of brake rotors and calipers for $1,800. Then you have the diff, which only pulled $800. I was under the impression that they were worth a little more money than that, just because of the cooling assembly on the back. Turns out that's not the case. They're all over eBay for $800. We have, of course, the airbag that I was so hyped about. $600, not too bad. One part that I said would pull some decent money, even though it was broken, the core support. The carbon fiber radiator support. A lot of words for it. You guys know what I'm talking about. $500. Somebody's going to have some work to do to try to piece that thing back together, but I think it's doable. They'll probably be able to do it and be happy that they just saved themselves $600, $700, $800.
Yeah, these GT350s are pretty cool that they have really a couple real high dollar items that are on them that are very different than the normal 5.0 Coyote Mustangs. And you can see that just reflected in the price breakdown.
Now it's time to shut the computer and bring out the real high-tech notes here. As for the car cost, $12,948. Very cheap by GT350 standards. In fact, the other one that you just saw was twice that amount of money. Car shipping, this came from, I'm blanking on this, it was Arizona?
New Mexico or Arizona?
I'm going with Arizona. You guys will be able to laugh at me if I'm not right on this because I already shut the computer and didn't put down where it's from in my notes. Anyway, back to it here. Part shipping, $1,750. Not a lot of parts. There's a few big ones. Seats, engine, and that's basically it. Everything else is not that bad to ship. Labor, $1,000. So that's pretty high when it comes to labor on these cars. Camaros we can run through for, I don't know, $6 in labor because they're so easy. This was the first Mustang that I had personally taken apart in quite some time, so I spent an embarrassing amount of time looking where certain screws are and how's the center console come out, only to find out that most of it was broken at all. There was a lot of wasted time. I think if I did another one, you know, a week from now, I could probably knock that down to $750. Selling fees, 10% as always, $3,008. Last up, dead inventory, all the stuff that doesn't sell real well. We'll put it like that. We have to discount it a bunch so it ends up being break even or worse, or we just throw it in the scrap dumpster and get, I don't know, what's the price of steel scrap now? Pretty cheap. Yeah, we scrap it 5 years from now. We're hoping not to do that very much with this car, so $1,500, very low. There's just not a lot that we kept off that car, so there's not a lot that's going to sit around. I mean, that's the simplest way you can possibly interpret this, but I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah, the market on the GT350s has changed over the past couple years in a good way. It seems like a lot more people are rebuilding them. They become more popular than they were 5 years ago when everyone was just disappointed in the motor and the Coyote was the modification platform. That's why we're going to be rebuilding one on the channel, but I agree that I think a lot of these parts, as these cars continue to be repaired, maintained, all that, it's going to sell pretty easily.
Anyway, so the final theoretical net margin on this car,
$8,977, which is much better than I would have guessed when that car showed up.
Now this is usually my favorite part of this whole deal. We got our new, scorecard up here, if you want to call it that. We see how high up on the leaderboard it's going to go. And then see what gets knocked off. But in this case, it's not making it there. Straight to the loser's aisle, which I do realize the irony of calling a almost $9,000 profit a loser. By any stretch of the imagination, this was a really good day. And I mean, I understand. It's a Mustang. You're not going to put it up there above a Corvette ZR1 or a Hellcat or a Chevy SS or, well, that's another Mustang, but yeah, I guess there goes that. But either way, not a bad day at the office. Now I'll take a profit like that all day long, but being down here with Pontiac GTOs and SRT4s, it's just not sitting right. I think I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board here. There's Corvettes, Hellcats, another Chevy, a Mustang, another Hellcat. I think for my next salvage story car, I want to do something different. Maybe something that we haven't done yet. Maybe something that we haven't parted out in quite some time, or maybe never parted out.
Full-on oddball, huh?
Yes, I think that's the ticket. American, European, Japanese, I don't care where the car comes from. I don't care what brand it is. Next time out here, we're coming for that #1 spot. Maybe we'll get something stock. Maybe it'll be a really modified car. Again, I don't know, but that #1 spot, it's ours next time. And on that note, I'll see you next time. Slippery snake. No, slippery, not sleepy snake.
Oh.
Oh, you don't want to get dirty?
No, I'd rather
I got you in 4K doing that.
But hey, we're not here to debate colors. You know, the only color we're worried about is green. You know what I'm saying, guys?
What do you mean? It doesn't make sense.
Oh, it makes sense.
No.
It makes sense.
It's not.
One cylinder that leaked down at a 7, which is still perfectly fine. It's a ruin and finance. It's kind of ruin and fine. That ruined fine. What the f? Why do I keep one? What am I trying to call you?
I was wrong on only those numeros.
Dos números?
Yeah.
Is that even proper Spanish?
Of course.
I don't know.
It's actually dos números, but I was trying to say it like...
Exactly, gringo.